Do you feel like you're barely keeping your head above water? That no matter how hard you try, meaningful progress remains out of reach? Heather gets that. She battled an eating disorder for years before seeking help. Now in recovery, Heather is here to tell you that positive change is possible even when it doesn't feel that way. Join her as she shares openly about her struggles and small triumphs. Fair warning though, Heather doesn't hold back. Her candid story may trigger some. But for those wanting honesty, hope, and healing, this is 1% Better with Heather. The information and stories shared on 1% Better are based on host Heather's personal experiences with eating disorders and mental health challenges. Heather is not a licensed doctor, therapist, dietitian, or other health professional. Her advice and opinions should not be taken as professional medical advice. Please consult your physician or a qualified health provider regarding any medical or health-related issues. 1% Better also contains descriptions of eating disorders that may be triggering for some listeners. Discretion is advised.
Hey there, my little gappers, and welcome to 1% Better with Heather in the studio today. I actually know, I know you, Nikki, right? I actually have a friend who we've worked together in the past. So, you know everything about me. We'll just say that. So no lying here. She can tell you I'm crazy. So
No.
It's all true. It's not an act. Welcome, Nikki. Welcome. So I'll get you to introduce yourself.
Sure, yeah. So my name is Nikki. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a therapist down in the Lower Mainland, Vancouver area. I have been a therapist now for 4 years, which seems like it was just yesterday, but a long time all at the same time. I focused a lot of my work in therapy around eating disorders, but also just generally around like body image, also with women and like identity, breaking free from systems that make us feel like we have to be someone or look like someone or follow someone. And so I love working with people and kind of reclaiming who they are, how they live their life, their identities, their relationship to themselves. And I think for a lot of people in general, but specifically for women, a lot of that comes down to our bodies and what we look like and what we feel like we have to do to be accepted or wanted or loved, So that's really where I've like found my niche in working with people thus far, and it's been great. It like has its ups and downs. It's difficult, and people can get to some really hard places, and it can take us down a really dark path at times. So kind of walking people through that darkness and joining that journey with them is really powerful. So I love the work that I do, and I'm excited to chat with you about all of this stuff.
Well, yeah, and I don't know how much therapy you needed after I left, but sorry about that one.
No.
Oh my God, they're like, finally, get her out of here. But let's talk about the big news, because I don't want to forget this one. Let's talk music therapy. You have a viral video on TikTok, over 1 million views. I get happy at 2. Right? And holy cow, like, did you think that was going to happen? Like, or were you just talking? Like, because you stitched a video with someone, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I know. That video really popped off. I had no idea it was going to do that. And that video, like normally I kind of plan a lot of my videos, like what I'm going to talk about, what I kind of want to hit home. That one was so random. Like I literally was just leaning over my kitchen counter. I had like just come in from a walk or something. I saw this video and I was like, oh, that makes me think of like neural nostalgia, which is what I talked about in the video. I just quickly recorded it, uploaded it, woke up the next day and it was already at like 100,000 views. And I was like, holy shit, like this is really popping off. And then it just kept climbing. It's almost at 2 million now. It's been shared like all over the world. And so for in the video, the creator talks about the video is kind of like me as a therapist, have you ever tried driving around or like listening to 2000s pop music? And I was like, oh yeah, like that makes me think of this concept called neuronostalgia. And basically what that is when we look at the brain development when we're going through those adolescent years, like 12 to 22, the music that we really loved and the music that we listened to can get embedded into our brain system deeper than music that we'll ever hear as like an adult. Not to say that we can't enjoy different music as an adult, but that specific music can get embedded into our brain's pleasure and reward system so much differently. And it's why so many people go back consistently and like listen to the music they loved as teenagers or like early 20s. And that's like a really consistent theme that people see. And myself, just as like a normal human, aside from a therapist, I'm a huge music person. Like I'll listen to music all the time in my car, like scream, sing it, and like when I'm getting ready, like music has to be on all the time. And I notice I'll go back to my kind of punk rock emo phase or like girly pop music from the early 2000s when I want a boost up. And what actually happens in our bodies is we get those surges of like dopamine and serotonin, and we actually allow ourselves to like move through moods and emotions. And I always do this when I talk about it because my body's already wanting to move, and we like naturally kind of can shift a lot of those emotions. And people just went like buck wild over this. They were like, "Oh my God, like, is that why I always go and listen to this? Or is that why I'm always doing this?" But I think what it really hit home for people was something simple can be so profound. And people were like, wow, I never made that connection that this thing like music could actually be helping me.
Yeah, and like so much is going through my head because I'm Gen Xer, right? And there's always that joke, right? Like, we're getting older, we go in the kitchen, don't know why we're there, but you want to know all of Madonna's like a prayer tape from 1989, 1988, whatever year that was. I'm good. I got it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can't remember anything else,
Yeah.
you know? And then when you're talking about that brings us back to childhood. Every time I hear the song Joyride by Roxette, it reminds me of Playland. I
Mm-hmm.
remember being on that the music one that would go backwards, you know,
Yep.
for
Yep.
until you got sick. But that song, and I can smell the mini donut. Like I can smell scents. I can smell the mini donuts. I can smell the cotton candy. I can smell the pavement. Playland is like our theme park here. So if you've ever been to any theme park, I'm going to assume it smells like mini donuts and sugar, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
just like there's certain like I even now I'm like, oh yeah, Playland. And it does, and you can't be in a bad mood after that, you know. I just can't. Well, one, I'm so happy for you. I can't believe something like that. 2 million views, holy Hannah!
Mm-hmm.
But something so simple can pull you out of such a dark spot, too.
Totally, totally. And I think that's actually why people resonated with it so much was because it's something that people have access to all the time, and a lot of people do it without even realizing it. Like they're like, "Oh, yeah, like is that why every time I hum or I sing, I like stop a panic attack?" I'm like, "Yeah." Like it definitely could be because you're connecting to music, you're connecting to like your vagus nerve, which is connecting to your nervous system, and people are like, "Oh my gosh, like I didn't even realize that when I'm upset, I put music on and I start cleaning, or I put music on and I start singing, and then it connects me, like what you just said, to a memory, to a really happy memory." And our brain actually surges us these like neurotransmitters of nostalgia and joy and pleasure. And we can shift through these like moods and emotions and things that are happening for us because we're connecting to ourselves in those moments and we're not disconnecting and dissociating. Because when we're listening, when we're singing, when we're humming, when we're dancing, we are with our bodies, like we're connected to them. But when we're having big things like anxiety or panic or worry or fear, our bodies naturally want to disconnect. So we find that we're like dissociating or numbing or isolating. And so it kind of does like the opposite effect. And a lot of people were doing it already, but they didn't put it together how it actually was helping them. And then once we do that, we can go, okay, well, now we actually can use this really intentionally, like make playlists from different times of your life or different memories or different periods, and use that when you feel like you're dissociating or you feel like you're numbing or you feel like you just want to scream your fucking head off because your kids are driving you crazy or like things are happening or you're so busy and stressed. Like, use that intentionally. I'll go for a drive in my car and just windows down, play music, and just like scream and sing. And it feels so good. Like, it's just so connecting. Or if I have like a sink of dishes that I have to do and I really don't want to, put on that playlist, turn it up, get myself going. Otherwise, I'll just like sink into the couch and be like, I don't want to do this. The music actually lifts our mood, which is it's really like genius to use it in so many different ways.
I'm a huge music person, and I just keep thinking, even in my car when we're sitting in, Surrey traffic here, yay, in construction season, because Vancouver only has 2 seasons, rain and construction. And I have this one song that always calms me down when I'm road raging, because I am that person. And it's Four Non Blondes, Hey, What's Going On? Because you're just yelling through that song. And it makes me happy.
Yeah, totally. You
And it
can
totally
even
works.
see like you're just like laughing and smiling thinking about it. Like, even just thinking about those kind of things makes our bodies feel so much better.
So we're feeling good with music here. Let's and kind of shift, because it is summer, or getting there here, and it's one of many women's fears,
Yeah.
bathing suit season. And I'm not immune to it, obviously, otherwise I wouldn't have this podcast. So how do we get through that? Because I know there's been times where I get invited to parties and I'm like, I'm not going. Either I'm not going, there's no way in hell I'm putting on a bathing suit, because in my mind, everyone's looking at me, everyone's staring at me, everyone's making comments about me. There's going to be food. Everyone's going to make a comment if I eat or don't eat, blah, blah, right? All this.
Yeah.
So now I'm already like not having a good time at a party that I haven't even gone to yet. So how do we stop the avalanche and be just live our best lives and not give a shit what people think?
Well, that's the thing. I think it's more about how do we actually focus in more on how do I tolerate that people are going to think and see and feel things about me. And I think we so badly want to get to this place where it's like, I don't care about what other people think, or I'm just going to like live my life and like free for all, bear it all out there. And ideally, like, that would be amazing. Like, if we could all get to that place, I'd love it. And I still feel those ways too. I'm still like, oh my God, like, who's going to be there? Like, what am I going to wear? Like, what do I look like? What do I this and what do I that? And we can go down that spiral for so long. Ultimately, what we have to do though is go, okay, those people are going to be there. They are going to look at me, and almost like plummet us like right into the biggest fear. What's the biggest fear? Whether it's like judgmental or judgment, or they're going to say something, or what are they going to think about me? And go into that and go, well, what if that does happen? And so what if that does happen? What am I going to do? Because I can either hide myself in comfort, which sometimes we have to do, or I can go, those people are going to think no matter what they think, and that's going to make me feel all sorts of ways. It's going to make me feel so insecure, so overwhelmed, stressed, nervous, anxious, whatever it is. And I have to believe that I'm capable of handling that. Because if I don't believe I'm capable of handling those emotions, then they will get the best of me. they will overcome me and I will retreat and hide. And so I think it's more about how do we actually scaffold ourselves and like equip ourselves with the right support, with kind of the right plan, with the right regulation tools or skills that we have to use to actually manage that situation. And over time, we will start to feel that volume knob of judgment kind of like turn down. We we won't care as much. We'll get over it quicker. We'll like manage it quicker, but it has to come from us actually going into the emotions first, because we can try to say to ourselves all day long like, oh, I don't care, or I don't care what they think, or I'm not going to care what they think. And then we get there and we're like, holy shit, I care so much
Yeah.
about what they think, and now I don't want to be here, and I was just like bullshitting myself in the car, like I really care. And so I always like to go, okay, so yeah, let's actually just go right into it. They care, they're going to judge, they're going to say something to themselves. Everyone's going to do that. And what are you going to do about it? And then I think it helps us and people actually be like, okay, yeah, that is true. Like, I can't actually control what people are going to say or what they're going to do. So, how do I get myself ready for that? How do I actually figure out when do I need to kind of lean into being comfortable? So, maybe there are times where I do just wear my comfy outfit, or I do just wear my outfit that I feel okay in. And then what are the times where I can kind of challenge myself? Like maybe I'm going to do a beach day with just my closest people that I know aren't going to judge me. So then I'm going to like bust out the bikini or bust out something to like get myself used to it, because going right off the deep end to just like
Yeah.
bikini at a stranger's party, like, ooh, that's a lot. Kind of figuring out how do we actually tiptoe into it, scaffolding ourselves with like support and coping and what we need to do.
So baby steps basically at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
And yeah. Well, yeah. So, but how do we stop comparing ourselves to others? And this maybe is like, I guess, a two-part question, because
Mhm.
now we'll go back into the social media now that you're a huge influencer. Uh,
Huge
you
influencer
know,
over here. Yeah.
and with the inundation of just information all the time, all the time, all the time, comparing. You should drink green juice. You shouldn't drink green juice. Don't eat bread. No, eat bread. Don't do that. Right. And look at me. I did wall Pilates and look how I look now. Oh, take Ozempic, which can be a different topic. But,
Mhm.
like, how do we, it's just so much. How do we stop the comparison on the hamster wheel of hell?
Yeah. Oh, I like that metaphor, the hamster wheel of hell. It really is. Honestly, what you said, there's so much out there around do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that. Eat this, you'll look like me. Work out like this, you'll look like me. And that's what's so hard about social media, is that human beings are like innately designed to compare because of survival, right? Like we think like way back in the day when we were cave people, our life was about survival. It's not like that anymore because we have a modernized world. Like we're not fighting off mammoths and shit. Like we don't need a lot of those survival things anymore. But it's still in us. We still have that innate design. The same way that our nervous system works and makes us petrified of everything that we don't need to be petrified of. So when we think about like what we're actually doing innately is comparing, and then we slap on something like social media that is just a shitstorm of comparing, of now we're compared to absolutely everybody in the world. I think it's like a bit of two things. Like we need to use like a logical lens of going, we know that genetics have such a huge impact on people's bodies, and two people could eat and do the exact same thing in one day and look so different. And so this logical lens of like all bodies are different, like social media is such a narrow lens of like when they're making a video, they're talking to like 1% of people, but we're generalizing it to our whole life. And so logically looking at like, how do I structure my social media so I'm not intaking absolutely everything as fact? And how am I actually maybe setting boundaries around social media or strategically following or not following things? How am I like fact checking those things, whether it's with other professionals in your life or your own kind of research? Doing that, and then that like emotional piece of how do I emotionally process and sit with these feelings of comparison and these feelings of like judgment or insecurity? Because at the end of the day, we have to come back to ourself even when we're comparing, even when we're constantly intaking social media and seeing everyone else. Because really, like, at the root of it, and this is what and how I see a lot of like the work that I do is we have to build a relationship to yourself, which means how do I show up to myself? How do I manage my emotions? How do I challenge my intrusive thoughts? How do I be kind to myself, use compassion and understanding and logic and accountability? Because I can compare myself to anyone all day long. And I will, because I'm a human and I'm innately designed to do that. But how do I actually manage that, both logically and emotionally? Because we're going to get bombarded with these messages, and breaking down like what diet culture is and how body and weight like oppression in the system works. We have to understand that. And I think that's why it's so important that when we do like body image, body dysmorphia, eating disorder recovery, whatever it is, a huge part of it is let's understand how this developed. Let's understand how this intense system even formed, because we have to use both of those lenses as we're intaking this information, right? We live in a social media world. We live in a world full of internet, and that won't go away now. And so we kind of have to figure out, how do we fit within that with a foundational relationship to ourselves, knowing that we do have to come back to ourselves when we're comparing, when we're disconnecting, when we're judging ourselves, when we're having emotions, when we're flooded with these messages that we were never designed as humans to have this kind of flooding of information. And so it is like a skill to have to learn how to decipher between it from both of those lenses. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. No, and it took me a while to figure this out. When starting, like right in the beginning of recovery of 2023, there were certain shows I couldn't watch because I was crying all the time. Like I love the OC 2004. Great show.
Mm-hmm.
All those chicks are in bikinis. They're all like that big. And here I am stuffing my face.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I wake up, I'm bigger, which is part of recovery. So I get it. But like still kind of a kick in the head.
Yeah.
Crying. And I'm like, I can't do this to myself. Still a great show, but in the moment, couldn't watch it. And even now with me on social media, if I'm watching the wrong thing and it's very easy to push those buttons, right? So I'm
Mm-hmm.
back to watching bunny and panda bear videos
Those
because
are
they
so
make me
cute.
happy.
Yeah.
But it's so easy, and even just not realizing that you're taking it in, right? And not sleeping properly or what it all affects you, and you might not even know what is happening.
Yeah, totally. I think because it's normal in a sense that we like when we're feeling that way because we're taking in so much, but also when we feel like disconnected from ourselves, right? Which we often do in active eating disorder and eating disorder recovery, like as we're kind of navigating that world of how do I actually connect back to myself and what do I need to do? Because in a lot of senses, like our body's so used to disconnecting and kind of like dissociating and leaving us. So it's hard when you start feeling again in recovery and using that more like both logical and emotional side of like, how am I intaking information? And like, oh, I am starting to recognize every time I watch that show, the eating disorder is getting louder and I'm like spiraling. And it happens like that, right? Like all of a sudden you're kind of in this place where you're like, holy shit, how did I get here? And like what happened? And tracing that back to things like TV shows, things like times in our life, right? Like even think of the 90s, early 2000s, like heroin chic was what we were taught to look like, right? And we see that in the shows like the OC, where the people and the actors in that show are so thin, but yet there's so many scenes where they're talking about how big they are or, you know, how fat they are. And it's a real mind twist when we watch it now, knowing what we know or having the experiences that we have. Because maybe logically you can be like, oh yeah, like that's not where I want to be. But like emotionally, or the eating disorder comes in, it's like, but do we want to be there? Should we? You know, and it's like kind of plants that little doubt, and then it's like, and then we feel so confused by it.
And now that you say that, because again, when I was like in recovery and in my bed, I remember going back in time and watching Blossom of all things, and I couldn't watch it anymore. I couldn't believe the amount of fat jokes and body comparison jokes, and she's only like 2 years older than me. That's what I was watching when I was 12. I was watching Blossom. And I'm like, is this why I'm like, when we're talking about the music and why we go back to music when we're kids and it's doing all our developing, the TV we watched as kids, now I'm thinking, oh, well, that wasn't a good thing. But in the day and the time of the 90s, it wasn't, that was comedy, right?
Yeah, totally. And those types of like shows and what we watch too also is getting like imprinted as we're watching those shows from that like really important developmental age. And so we do have a really strong connection to some of those characters or some of the shows. And so it is like a really weird experience when we go back and watch them, because it can feel both comforting in a sense, because it's like, oh, this is my comfort show, or this is what I watch, this is what I love, this is what I was brought up on. But then at the same time, we're like, oh, that's kind of messed up. Like, what is happening in this show? And is that what I was intaking? Right. And then, like, just how you kind of were like, is that why I think like this? Like, we kind of connect those dots, and then we're like, wow, like, that was a lot of brainwashing and a huge impact in such a developmental stage that can really, really make us believe and think and feel like that's our identity, or that's what we have to be striving for or upholding.
Yeah, it just, I don't know. Like I'm like getting this aha moment. I'm like, this is making a lot of sense now, right? And it's just funny how the, what do you want to call it? Like corporations don't do this, but go and eat all the Doritos, because you'll watch 1,000 Doritos commercials in the 90s, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's almost like talking out two sides of your mouth. Don't do this, but do this. Don't do this, but do this. It's so confusing. And even the commercials, I was watching like an old Special K commercial on TikTok. It was like, oh, 80s commercials. I'm like, this is up my alley. And just in that, it was like, you can't pinch an inch on me. That was their slogan. And I'm telling you, I remember that. And I was like, I remember this commercial. And the wife is grabbing her husband, like his belly, and they're like, eat the Special K in 2 weeks. You can, like, the Special K diet. And then they go back. They're like, see, can't pitch an inch on me. I'm going to get sued.
Wow.
Ah! Oh, well, that's true, though. I don't care. They can take a number. There's a lot of people out there suing me at the moment.
Get in line.
Yeah. So I just like, even that commercial now is coming. I'm like, maybe that's why.
Mm-hmm.
And drinking Crystal Light when I was a kid. Is that why?
Uh,
Because Crystal Light came out in the 80s. That was the big thing. It's
Yeah,
just weird.
it is. And it's usually like an accumulation of so many things. But then you start thinking about it, and it's not even just like maybe necessarily the diet, like culture dieting, here's the next diet, but it's here's all food in general, or here's all things that you're intaking in general. Here's what you're watching, here's what you're learning. Like it's so much more around us, and sometimes we don't even recognize until, like you said, we watch these things and we get transported back to that time, and then we're like, whoa, I remember that commercial and I didn't even think about it, how that impact happens, right? And a lot of people skin pinch and hip pinch, and they're like, we don't like this. I don't want this. I don't want anything that I can pinch. And it's like commercials like that about where it comes from. Where do we see that, right? Like, where do we experience that as something that it seems true? And especially, back in like the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s, when TV was really coming up, commercials were really coming up, like it seemed fact. Whereas now we have a better idea and a better lens of how to kind of cipher through the bullshit, or cipher through and make our feeds, our social media feeds, what we want to see. And we kind of have that more critical lens of like, okay, not everything we see on the internet is true, and we can kind of decipher through that a bit. But back then, like, we didn't, well, I wasn't born in the 80s, I was born in the 90s, but back then, like,
Okay, there.
almost in the 80s, okay, not that young.
80s adjacent.
But back then people didn't have that, right? Like it was like, oh, this is fact, and this is what I need to believe about myself.
It's it's just so weird. Everything like social media, it's a great thing, but I don't know. There's days where I'm like, oh no. And I'm cynical. I know not everyone's me. I'm like everyone's full of crap. Right? And there's lighting and editing, and I don't know how to edit a video on my side to save my life. So I'm like, oh, my videos suck. But like there's um God bless the Kardashians with all their filtering, right? And filters. And before, like, you used to have to be a photographer to do Photoshop. Now, like, if
Anyone.
you got a really fancy dancy phone, or even a basic phone, I guess you can put a filter on there,
Mm-hmm.
and they're very hard to know what's real, what's fake.
Yeah, totally. Especially with AI, right? Like we're not even close to seeing what AI can do. And like AI can completely fabricate a video, where so even before with Photoshop, right? Like that used to just be photoshopping photos. Now you can Photoshop videos, and there's no glitch, there's no nothing. So that used to be people's like go-to. Oh, like if you think my photos are photoshopped, here's a video, and they'll show it. But it's like you can AI videos now. So, and you won't even be able to tell. There's no glitch, there's no weave in the lines and the wall, there's nothing. So it is incredibly difficult. And we, like, so many people, celebrities have been caught photoshopping and caught doing all of these things, face tuning and doing whatever they do in post production of photos and videos. But we're now on the cusp of even more of that because of AI. And we don't even know where that's going to go and how dangerous that is for people.
Well, I could tell you, in the modeling world, there's an AI model that's booked constantly. And everyone, and they're trying to, from what I understand, kind of trick you into thinking that it's real,
Mhm.
and you want to look like her. Well, how do you look like a computer? I don't even know what you're like. That is just, I don't know, like a recipe for disaster, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you're going to start comparing yourself to a cartoon, really, at the end of the day, It's like saying you want to be Jessica Rabbit. All right. Like,
Yeah, but yeah, that is. And I think that's, why it's so important to go back to both like, how do we actually shift through what we're intaking on social media and really recognize that, like, and root in the fact that a lot of this is fake. Root in the fact that people can create content to actually psychologically make you want to do what they're doing. And it's not all genuine, it's not all, positive. We do have to use that like critical thinking mindset. But in order to do that, we have to build that foundation of relationship to ourselves, because if we hate ourselves and we talk like shit to ourselves and we don't care about ourselves, well, of course we're going to want to eat what anyone's selling us. Like, we're going to want to be so far away from ourselves. We don't want to be connected to ourselves. And I think like that relationship to ourselves, it's not about I have to love myself. Like, that's great if we can get there, but that's not a starting point. I think our starting point is, how do I just get into a relationship with myself? And if I can build one on the starting blocks of acceptance or neutrality, or just not hate or acceptance, then that gives us the first step of like, okay, maybe I don't like myself every day. Maybe I don't love myself every day. That's okay. We can still treat ourselves with respect and care without loving ourselves, without being obsessed with ourselves. It's the same way that we'll treat other human beings with respect, even if we don't know them, or we don't like our partner some days and we still show up for them and we still, do things. If we can get into a relationship with ourselves, then we can see ourselves with a little bit more understanding or respect or compassion to start like building those blocks of, how do I show up to myself when I'm criticizing and being so mean to me in my head? How do I manage these emotions of feeling less than or insecure or insignificant? At the end of the day, like, it's us versus us. So we can either show up to ourselves trying a different way, or we can kind of continue down that shame spiral, which overtakes us really quickly. And when we're in that place, we're a lot more susceptible to like social media messaging, influencing, wanting to disconnect. And it's a really hard relationship to build, especially when we bring in like eating disorders and things like that have really overtaken that relationship. It takes a while to like get the eating disorder, out a different room, let alone like in the backyard, let alone off your property, right? Like, it takes time to do that, which is why we're not just going to jump into I love myself every day, but can we maybe take a step into, I can be neutral about myself today, or I can accept myself today even if I don't really like it. I can still show up to myself even if it's hard. And just taking those steps is actually going to help us put boundaries on social media, kind of figure out how we want to curate our life, basically.
I do find for me, the spring, like, this is my good season. I don't like being overly hot, but I like spring, right? Capris, tank top, patio weather, kind of like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But I find it easier to be in a better mood when it's nice out. And with spring and summer comes a lot of the fresh vegetables and fruits and summer foods, right? Summer scents. And I don't know, it just seems to be easier on me than, rain Vancouver in the winter and it's minus 15 outside, raining sideways. No, it's just easier to be in that slump when everything around you is murky as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy just to stay there. But I'm finding now with this nice weather, going for a little walk, see the
Mm-hmm.
neighborhood, Check out the cherry blossoms. I've been doing that a lot. That makes me happy. I've been just
Totally.
looking at the cherry blossoms.
Yeah, I love that. I think so much like I like simplifying things in our life, and that doesn't mean like removing or downplaying the things we're going through, but it actually means like how do we connect and make things a little bit simpler? Like what you just said, like noticing the cherry blossoms or like noticing which flowers are blooming, smelling like fresh cut grass. Like those things actually make such an impact that we often minimize because we want these like big things to come in and save us or these big things to come in and rescue us. And sometimes we want to overcomplicate it because we want it to validate our pain. Like if people have been through so much pain and so much hardship that they want this like big thing to validate it. Like it has to be so hard. And while there's so many things that are really hard, can we simplify some things? Can we go for a walk and notice the cherry blossoms, smell the scents, pick up some fresh vegetables and like really taste them. Make a meal, put on your favorite song, connect to yourself, allow yourself to dance or be silly or sing. And those things, like people are like, yeah, like that actually made a big difference that I didn't think it would, but it did. And can we like bring ourselves those pieces of connection, those pieces of with our bodies, with our senses, right? Smell, sight, taste, what can we hear? Like listening to the birds can feel like so magical because they're so pretty and like cool and like they sound so lovely. If we simplify some of those things, it actually gives us more capacity to fight the big things. Right. And I love that. I love that you said that. That's
Well, and that, as you're saying all that, that's one of your videos was enjoy the simple things in life and your top 3 secrets to life, right? So do you want to share that? What are your top 3 secrets?
I'm trying to think of that video that I made. So like, oh, I remember that I did that.
Oh, no, I put you on the spot. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'm just trying to remember exactly what it was. Because I mean, I have a lot of things that I like really value in, I'd say like our relationship to ourselves is so important with how we navigate the world. And if we can get on the same page of ourselves, we're gonna do amazing things because a lot of pain is rooted in being disconnected from ourselves.
Right.
And so if we can come back in a way where we are on our same team, it can feel so incredibly magical in ways where we have our back. So I like root a lot of the work I do in the relationship to ourselves. A lot of the work I would say too is like in connection. So how are we actually connecting and self-expressing in regards to our smell, our sight, our taste, whatever we can hear, see, feel, and doing that often, whether we're connecting to nature, whether we're connecting to other human beings, animals, like what other things can we actually connect to in the sense that has life? And how are we like self-expressing? You know, I believe that everyone is innately creative in some way, shape, or form. We get like pigeonholed that like creativity is like, oh, can you paint or can you draw? And it's like, well, no, I can't do that thing. But there's so many ways that we can be self-expressive. How do we express ourselves in the way we dress, in the way we present ourselves, in how we do our hobbies, activities, like podcasting? Like, you know, there's so many ways that we can actually express ourselves that comes from the relationship to ourselves because we can push away all of these things when we're on a pursuit of trying to be someone else. And it's really scary to lean into expression or creativity because in order to do that, we have to be connected to ourselves. And the things that get in the way of that are usually like people pleasing, perfectionism, wanting control, imposter syndrome, right? We feel like we're not good enough. What are people going to say? What are they going to think? How are they going to see me and look at me? And that makes me afraid to connect to myself because it's vulnerable. And to be vulnerable and to be brave and to be courageous, we don't know the outcome. And if we're so afraid of the outcome, we're going to avoid it. If we want to control the outcome, we're going to avoid those things. And so it's this balance of, okay, well, how do we do scary, vulnerable, creative things while also leaning into, I can't control this. And what is it going to look like to just do something? And people might judge me for it.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. I found like, and I'm like the queen of denial, distraction, whatever. No feelings here. No. And it took a lot to sit in the shit and just because you got to feel to heal.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't sit in the shit, well, then it's just not going to grow. Everything grows in shit, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
there it is. And now coming this far, and I'm not a dirt person. I am not a nature person. I am not that person. I find camping torturous. But I will take my socks and shoes off and put my feet in the grass. And there's something coming back to earth. Like, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There is something about that is, I don't know what it, like rejuvenating. Like it does something.
Mm-hmm.
Being out in nature does something for you.
Yeah, totally. And you know, even when you just said like I'm not a nature person, like I would almost like argue, like you've brought up cherry blossoms, you brought up like going for walks, now you have your feet in the grass. Like I think you are a nature person, but
well, I'm not like a hiking, camping kind of person.
Perfect, that's fine. And I think that's like how we often, you know, view things of like, oh, if I don't like this, maybe I'm not that kind of person. But you know, it's the same thing like what I was just talking about with creativity. Oh, I can't paint or draw, so I'm not a creative person. Yeah, you are, because there's thousands of other ways to connect to creativity than just painting and drawing, you know, or there's thousands of other ways to connect to nature than just camping and dirt biking or whatever, you know. And so it's how are we actually viewing these things? And how can we actually go, okay, maybe I'm not into that piece, but I'm really into this piece. You know, like I didn't even discover I was a creative person until like 5 years ago because I was always under that impression, oh, I can't paint or draw for shit. Like stick people are my jam. Like I can't do that. So I must not be a creative person because that's all I learned in art in high school. I blocked and blocked and blocked and blocked my creativity until I found a camera. And then I found a camera and it opened up this huge world for me of photography and videography and art through my camera. And I felt like I unleashed this like beast of creativity. Like I was like, holy shit, like I didn't even know that this was all happening under here. And then through that, I started doing so much more identity work for myself around how do I express myself? Because I wasn't expressing myself at all. If anything, I was numbing myself. And that opened up a whole new experience for me. And so when people say, like, I'm not creative or I'm not this, I'm always like, you just haven't figured it out yet. You just haven't found it yet. And what does that look like for people? Right. And so it's, again, like we kind of get into these squares of like you belong in this box and you belong in that box, and diet culture is great for that. If you're not this, if you don't look like this,
Perfect.
well, you're in this box, and if you don't look like this, get into that box. And we box ourselves in with all these different ways that the world has told us we have to be, and then it feels real, feels like that's just who we are.
And it's so hard to, when you come from this world, right? Not to be perfect, because I can't draw save my like I can't even draw a stick man. So you're way better. You're Picasso to me, man. And I no, but I can bake. But can I bake fancy wedding cakes and make all that? No, I can't. That stresses me out thinking about it. But I can make banana bread, and I'm good at what I am good at, right? But also, I find like cleaning my house. I know that for some reason brings me joy. I mopped floors yesterday. I felt so good after I mopped that floor. Like, look at how nice that looks. Good job, Heather. Right? For the dog to come along and mess it up again. But that's okay. Like, there's just something about seeing some sort of finished project, even if it's a puzzle, right? If you even make a little puzzle,
Totally.
like
Yeah.
you get the validation. Like, I did that. Look at me in a
Totally.
healthy way.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you get that, but what you also get is like the process of it, right? Like when we think about cleaning, a lot of people enjoy cleaning for many different reasons, but even just like the repetition of doing something like mopping can be like very back and forth. It can be really regulating, but also what you're doing is you're moving your body. So your body is like moving, you're getting different things going on, different hormones, neurotransmitters are happening. Typically, like sometimes maybe you're listening to music while you're mopping, and then
Yep.
you're like singing to the mop, and then you're like dancing, and then you have the finished product, and then you feel really good because you completed something, you were accountable, and like now you can physically see what you're doing. So there's so many layers embedded in things like this as to why it's actually helpful to do it and why it feels so good and regulating.
Well, let me tell you, it was a workout and a half. Holy
Yeah,
cow.
totally.
But like, even like, cause I have those Scentsy things and I found a lemon blueberry one. My house smelled amazing yesterday. I'm
Mm,
like, this is really nice. I like this. And then I've dug out all my, Bath and Body Works stuff, which is all as what I think Hawaii would smell like. I've never been to Hawaii, probably never going to Hawaii because I'm poor, but it's like coconutty and
yeah.
I smell like a tropical princess, let me tell you.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it puts me in a good mood.
Yeah.
So I've really had to push myself now after coming out of the shower. I'm like, put on that body spray because then it, I'm like, well, why am I putting on body spray? Who am I going to go see? Like the dog? But it helps so much throughout the day,
Hmm.
just to
Totally.
keep that good mood going.
Yeah, and that's like that simple thing that connects to a sense of smell, that connects to also a sense of taking care of yourself, right? Like that's such a beautiful thing to be like how you're showing up for yourself of like I care about myself. I'm going to do this. I love the smell of it. It smells good. I'm going to actively put it on me. And that is like an act of self-care towards ourselves. Even these small simple things, you can feel it throughout the rest of your day of this actually is making an impact. And it's not for no reason. It is actually because you're showing up to yourself, because you're caring for yourself, because you're smelling something that connects to a future memory or something else, or just this is a sense of comfort, a sense of connection. And those small things, when we actually acknowledge the simple small things we're doing, it builds a lot more self esteem, a lot more accountability because self esteem isn't rooted in how much we like ourselves or what we look like or what our body looks like. It's rooted in our relationship to ourselves. And if we're showing up to ourselves, we're following through, we're holding ourselves accountable, we're connecting to our bodies, we're caring, we're challenging, that's the foundation of self esteem because that's how we show up to ourselves. Self esteem rooted in what we look like or what our body looks like is so conditional. And it's conditional off of what's the trend of the year or how are we fitting in. That's disconnection from ourself. So if we want to bring self esteem back to a foundational piece of connection, it can't be about like or love or conditional
Mhm.
what we look like. It has to be about our relationship to ourselves and how we're showing up for ourselves.
And I like what you say. Like, even if you just don't, if you're just neutral today,
Mm-hmm.
just neutral,
Totally.
right? And that just not going in the mirror and saying something mean, right? Not having those, just one day, just give yourself a day off and see what happens, right? You might go on strike. Who knows?
Yeah,
So you might like it, just one day and see how things go.
totally. Exactly. Like it's the 1% better, right? 1% better a day in a year, you're going to be in a totally different place. And sometimes 1% can feel like a lot, and sometimes it feels really doable. And we don't always have to be on this huge trajectory climb, making these massive changes. But if we can interject one critical thought a day, if we can be neutral for one piece of our day, right, that does make a difference. And we want results right now
Mm-hmm.
because we want to get out of the pain. But when we can give ourselves that patience and understanding of this took decades to develop, and I'm completely divorcing myself and remarrying someone new. Like this relationship wasn't working out. I need a new one. And how do I work towards that every day, showing up to myself? And sometimes it's, I can't challenge anything today, but I'm not going to beat myself up in the mirror. And that is improvement too.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about your counseling,
Yeah.
your company.
Yeah. Yeah. So I do, I'm really passionate about like accessible mental health. I'm really passionate about like changing how we view mental health, how we treat mental health. We see it, as a very, I mean, our healthcare system doesn't really want to accept a lot of like therapy or mental health. And if it does, there's usually long wait lists, it's limited time, limited resources, limited things that you can get. And you kind of have to have like a specialized diagnosis or something going on for you to even access those kinds of treatment or care. So I do private practice, I do both one on one therapy, but I also have recently, in the past few months, created what I call the Wellness Club. And this was something that kind of was designed out of this gap that I feel like the industry has. Like, you can either go through the public healthcare system,
Yeah.
which you're going to be faced with like 7,000 barriers around what you can access, how long you can access it for, what they can even offer with the limited resources and budgets that they have. Or you can go the private sector, right? And the private sector, if you're lucky enough to have benefits, you might get 4 or 5 sessions a year covered, maybe. And if not, it's a very privileged space where you're paying anywhere from $150 to $200 per hour. And in this economy, like in any economy, that's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of money. And do therapists deserve it? Yeah, they're well educated. They deserve the money that they have. It's not about that, but it's about access. And how do we, like, there's nothing in between, And I find with so many people that I'm starting working with, I'm educating them on so many things, right? I'm educating them on what is perfectionism, what are boundaries, what are the systems of oppression, how does mental health work, what is family trauma, what does trauma do in your body? And that's because nobody has this like mental health information. Like, we don't learn that.
Yeah.
You learn that in therapy school. And so if you're not a therapist, you ain't learning it. And so I was finding like, holy shit, like I'm doing so much education with these people, which is totally fine and normal, but I can do this better. Like, I can do this differently for you. I don't want you to pay me $150 an hour when I can educate you differently. So I created this club where it's like a membership based program. It's $55 a month. So it's really accessible. And I do all of these workshops, like hour-long workshops where I break down all of these topics like confidence, self-esteem, emotions, body image, the systems of oppression, perfectionism, imposter syndrome, like all of these have full 1, 2, 3 hour, like different workshops. It's like a platform of resources, a platform of videos I've made, videos that I've got from other places, journal prompts, everything. That's all in one area. And then I also do like a monthly support group where it's like, come and talk to other people, come and ask me questions. Let's talk about what's going on. And it actually gives people like a platform to go to learn about all this stuff. You can take in as much as you want, as little as you want. It's there for support. I do like weekly ask me anythings where people can just ask me a question. Like, there's so many people that are like, oh, I don't want to book a full session. Like, I just have a question, or can you steer me in this direction? Like, yeah, we should have more access to mental health professionals where you don't have to always book a full hour-long session with them. I want people to have more access to it. I want people to be able to explore these things on their own, learn about why you struggle with perfectionism, listen to this workshop, figure out. I break everything down. I give you tangible things you can do. And then when you get stuck on something, then take that to therapy. And then you actually have like a focused thing and you understand and you're actually using that time a lot more beneficially. And so it is a place that people can kind of have in that in between of like, maybe they just want to be connected to a wellness space or have these accessible touch points or support groups. Maybe they really want to do a lot of learning about themselves. Maybe they just really want to like value being connected to a mental health and wellness space, because where else can we get that? You know, like other than one-to-one therapy or like program or government funded programs, we don't really have a lot of other kind of in between spaces. So I was like, people really need that. Like, they really need this in between spot. So that like really came out of this, how do I give things, people accessible information, education, understanding, and support all in one.
You're like the full service garage. So if you're keeping your tank full, you're never go empty and blow your engine.
I love that. Yeah, yeah, totally.
So like you're just giving everyone whatever pertains to them at the time, right? Like, so wouldn't that be, that's amazing. You are the one-stop shop.
Exactly. You come to the one-stop shop. I'll give you my vault of information and everything that I do, right? Like, I break things down so like intense, in depth, like give so much understanding for people, because I was finding like so many people would say like, oh, I don't have the time or money for therapy, so I'll come like once every 2 months. And so by the time they come, they're fitting 2 months of things into 1 hour.
Yeah.
And they're like, I need this and I need this and I need this and I don't know anything about this and and it's just like, oh, this is stressful for both you and me. Like, it's hard when, you know, you're running a life, you have kids, you have a job, you have your own shit, you have all this stuff. You're in the middle class that, you know, middle class can't even afford life anymore. So to be able to actually schedule out of your own schedule and financially support yourself both in your life and mental wise, a lot of people are falling through the cracks. Like, so many people are falling through the cracks. I want to go to therapy but I can't afford it. I don't have time. I don't have anything. Like, I can't even start. I don't even know where to start.
Yeah.
And so this helps people to go, yeah, figure all this stuff out. Here is all of this information that is actually broken down. You know, like, podcasts and books and everything are so great, but to have like a full hour where I'm just talking about boundaries, we're just talking about boundaries for a full hour and I'm explaining it exactly how I would explain it to somebody I'm working with and talking about, and people can join live and ask me questions, or it's recorded and they can watch it whenever they want, however many times they want, you know, so it's there all the time. And I think that that is true accessibility, to go back to this whenever you want, bookmark which time you want to listen to, because so many times people will be like, I can't remember what you said, or like, what did you say about that again, or I know we had something profound but I just it just left me, or like, I can't remember. And it's not always helpful for people when we don't have things all together for them. This is what you can go back to.
And too, one thing that was bothering you or me a week ago, now it's 2 weeks, now it's 3 weeks, now we've added 5 more things. Now, like, we could have just taken care of this one little thing. Now we got a bigger snowball. Like, now we have an avalanche, right?
Yeah.
And that, I just think that that's amazing. And I have seen your videos, and I know Nikki personally, so I can contest or say how amazing the videos are and how wonderful Nikki truly is. So thank you, Nikki.
Yeah,
and where can everyone find you on social media? I don't want to hold you up too long. So all your social media and your everything.
Yeah, you can find me Instagram and TikTok. So it's just NikkiRoy.collection. You can find me on both of those. I'm pretty active on both of them. And then also, like, on my website, I can send it to you so you can put it in any kind of notes or whatever. And also, like, I have like a booking link if anyone wants to chat with me about what would be kind of like an option for you or what would be best fit for you. Of course, can kind of talk about what would fit you better. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
I highly recommend. Highly. Highly.
Thank you.
This episode is highly supported for Nikki. The 1% Better podcast supports Nikki Roy.
Yeah, perfect. We support each other.
Yay. Thank you so much, Nikki. Thanks for coming. I hope you come back. Man, I could talk to you all the time.
Yeah,
well, I
totally.
have.
Totally. We can do it again for sure.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
That's all for this episode of 1% Better. To continue the conversation, head over to our website at www.1percentbetter.ca, where you can access more stories and resources. We'd also love it if you subscribed and left us a review on your favorite podcast platform. And remember, friends, progress takes patience, perspective, and sometimes a little help from people who get it. So be kind to yourself and others as we work to get 1% better every day. We'll see you back here next week.